The Weaver is a specially trained Elonian elementalist who wields dual attunements. They cycle the elements from hand to hand, combining them in their central skill.
Well, so a few days ago, you guys should have seen I had a mount-oriented interview with the developers of Guild Wars 2 Path of Fire, in which they talked a little bit about why mounts work in this franchise, despite its history, where mounts really haven't had a very big part. I wanted to continue that theme for all of my interviews, drawing comparisons between Path of Fire of today and why it's doing things the way it's doing things, and Guild Wars 2 of earlier. Guild Wars 2 is not a perfect game, it's made some mistakes in the past, and I wanted to see how the devs felt they had progressed from those places. Today, I'm talking to the Elite Specialization team. These guys have been responsible not only for the balance of the core classes, the Elite Specializations from Heart of Thorns for the past 2 years, but also they've been responsible for making the new Elite Specializations at the same time. Needless to say, I think this is an incredibly difficult job, considering Guild Wars 2 has so many different aspects to it. World versus world, PvP, and multiple facets of PvE too. It's tricky, and I want to get a little bit into their head and talk about the 9 elite specializations. Hope you guys enjoy, and I'm very curious what you think. So I'm here in a room with 3 ArenaNet developers. These guys are primarily responsible for elite specialization design, and I'm sure we've all got a lot of things that we're very interested in. I'll give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hi there, I'm Carl McLean. I work as a game designer for the Skills and Balance team.
This is Robert G. I'm another one of the Skills and Balance guys, worked on a lot of the elite specializations.
Ireneo Kalman Huang, and yeah, the same team.
Why don't you guys describe, over the past 2 years or so, 2 years ago Heart of Thorns came out, and we saw a lot of you guys, we saw a lot of talk about 9 elite specializations that came out, and then it kind of went dark, and obviously we've had balance for that time, but the answer to that is you've been squirreling away, you've been working behind the scenes developing these. Is it fair to say you've had longer on this than the Heart of Thorns set?
Sure, yeah. I would say that we have spent more time just because we started working on these shortly after we went out with Heart of Thorns. It's really nice to actually have a little bit more time to work on it. I would say that it should come through in each of the elite specializations, the amount of polish that we've had.
So across the 3 of you, you kind of have ownership of the different elite specializations, just as, again, we saw in Heart of Thorns. So can you tell me, we'll go across the room, right, what you've worked on this time and what you'd worked on last time and how that went, all right? Because this will teach people, this will put them in the right frame, okay? So we'll go this way around.
All right. So this time I've been, Carl McLean, been working on the Weaver for the Elementalist. Previously I had done the Dragon Hunter, the Tempest, and the Daredevil.
Okay. So the fact you did Tempest, did that help you a lot with the Weaver?
Yes, the Tempest, we learned a lot. We changed a lot of our kind of thoughts about it. We thought more about how the trade-offs work, and and tried to get a lot more focus toward what we want the Weaver to do. So yeah,
because you say that the Weaver's quite interesting in that it's got so many skills. It does so much.
Just a ton of things that it is doing well.
I would feel like it's almost impossible to find, to hone in on a niche.
Weaver is much more toward a specific, aggressive goal rather than the Tempest, which had a lot of offense to it. It has a lot of defense and support, and it had a lot of different areas. Whereas the the Weaver is, is more aggressively directed, and it has a lot less support available to it.
Does it feel good to finally give people Ellie Sword?
Yes, Elementalist Sword is great because people have been asking for it forever.
It would almost be annoying because there's all this wonderful thought and things that go into an elite specialization, mountains of it. And yet most people are just going to be like, yeah, it's got a sword, I want it. And they'll leave it at the door there.
Yeah, there are tons of mechanics that we're looking forward to showing off, like the dual attacks and the dual attunements for the Weaver, and excited to see how people start using them. And
So before this interview, just to wrap up with the Weaver, I talked a lot about Fresh Air. Fresh Air seems like a match made in heaven for the Weaver. Do you have any particular synergy or thing that you think people should keep an eye out for when they're running Weaver?
I kind of want to leave just in the open.
Okay.
Really.
Yeah.
Because we'd like to see, there are a lot of different builds. I would like to see some defensive build, condition builds, hybrid builds. You know,
Is it a fool's game to try and predict how the player base will apply what you've made?
possibly.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
the-
reasonable.
But we have a lot of builds worked out. We've been looking at like the ways to optimize it and have been practicing with it and having. There have been a lot of people here that have really taken to the specialization and have come to love it. Really.
Hey, so this is Robert again. Last time I worked on the Mesmer Chronomancer, the Necromancer Reaper, and the Warriors Berserker class. This time around, I'm working on the Mesmer's Mirage, the Warrior's Spellbreaker, the Thief's Deadeye, and the Engineer's Hollowsmith
So it feels like
specializations.
you've taken a lot of the same classes again, but added Thief to there as well. Oh, and NG.
Yeah, well, I didn't do... Ireneo handled the Necromancer this time around. So we did shuffle things around a little bit from the last time we handled this.
What to you has been the difference between the last set of elite specializations? Is there something that excites you more about this set, specifically of the ones you've been working on?
I think what excites me the most about this set is that we have the experience of the first set behind us, so we were able to leverage that a lot in order to try to know some of the mistakes we made the first time around and be able to correct those, as well as to be able to try things that we hadn't tried last time because either we were crunched for time.
You got examples of those things?
So let's see. So I guess like one quick example is that like with the Thief's Deadeye, we decided to explore the rifle space a little bit. I know there were some fans who really wanted that the first time around, and so we had some ideas, and and because I think Irene mentioned we had a little more time this time around, we were able to think on these ideas a little more, make sure that they were a little more fleshed out in what we wanted to do.
Now, with Deadeye, quite a specific thing to me is I was always kind of interested in that because it seems like a very scary thing to pursue because, like, especially from a PvP perspective, there is little less fun than just randomly instantly dying from range. So was that on your mind as you worked on Deadeye, or was this a tricky act?
Yeah, that was probably one of the very first things we thought of with regard to this, and one of the reasons we were a little hesitant to do it even the first time around. And we went with Daredevil instead. But I believe that we had Rifle Thief on our mind even back then.
It's the first thing people think of, right?
Yeah.
It's just then you realise, oh, this could be horribly flawed
Yeah.
unless we make it in the
It's
right way.
incredibly fun for one
Yeah.
person to play.
Yeah.
Not to play against.
Yeah, and so the Deadeye, for example, because of that and because of the extra time we had, we were able to put a lot of systems in to try and make that experience a little more dynamic for both players. I think counterplay was a definite thing that we wanted to keep in there.
What's an example of counterplay?
So, for example, we have a lot of tell mechanics to tell you that the thief is that a Deadeye is stalking you. Okay. He's based around a new mark mechanic. Then the mark mechanic is where a lot of his damage comes from. But by marking a player, the other player knows that you are after them. There are some other situations. We put longer delays on some skills. A lot of his more powerful skills have some longer delays. His most powerful skill reveals him to prevent you from just dying from stealth, for example, is another thing that we do. He's not quite, we definitely themed him a little bit after like the whole idea of the sniper, like the first-person shooter sniper, but we didn't want to have that kind of gameplay. Obviously, Guild Wars 2 is a very different game, so we had to theme it around in different ways. He's a little more patience-based. He has to wait for some things, and we use that to meter out the counterplay.
So moving on, I want to talk to you a little bit about Spellbreaker. So I've only had a slight hands-on with it, but I found it really interesting seeing how essentially this is everything I found fun about classic Denial Mesmer that seems to have made its way onto that class. Like I think I saw essentially a version of Mirror of Disenchantment is on the Spellbreaker.
I think it was Winds of Disenchantment. That's I think that was
one boon is lost. Everyone around there loses that boon.
Oh no, sorry, yeah, no, so I'm thinking about it. That's a different one I'm thinking
There's
of.
Scourge, maybe I was thinking of.
No. That is one of his. That is one of his abilities. That's Enchantment Collapse. I think that was named after a Guild Wars 1 skill.
But so this is something in what you did with Heart of Thorns. I think a lot of people picked up on as well, taking on Guild Wars 1 influences and putting them through. Was that a big thing on your mind with the Spellbreaker and some of your more recent specs?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think most of the elite specs that we designed are. I like to say it's one class through the lens of another. Mm-hmm. So Spellbreaker on a lot of levels is Mesmer through the lens of a warrior. If a warrior was going to be like a Mesmer, how would he do it? He wouldn't do it like a Mesmer. He doesn't cast magic, but he has disrupting attacks. He has thematic
fencing style things as well. Like if you think of the F2, it's a very kind of
Yeah, he has counterattacks and things and things like that disrupt enemies, rather than saying like I'm going to create this just shatter your enchantments. He'll strike at your enchantments and cut them off.
Was there anything quite tricky about that elite spec? Like I found that the idea of you have some downsides as well, and that you remove your own boons, right? It's a very nice thematic idea. But did you find that was tricky to balance? How much might should we give this class, because he's ultimately going to strip it when he heals?
Yeah, I think that was a very difficult thing to go about doing. Typically, disadvantages are hard to slot in because players always want to be as strong as possible. It's hard. Like it was a little easier in Guild Wars 1, I think, to have skills with disadvantages because you could easily slot them in and out. So we had to be really careful about which skills we allowed to have these disadvantages. Like the heal you mentioned that strips your own boons, for example, you can just slot a different heal if you want. You're not stuck with it. So a lot of the skills that have some kind of disadvantage aren't usually ones that you have to have in your bar.
So we've got 2 minutes to,
All right,
to talk about your
What do you want to talk about?
specialization.
All right, so this is Aurelio again. The first time around in Heart of Thorns, I worked on the Ranger's specialization of the Druid and the Engineer's specialization of the Scrapper. This time around, I worked on the Ranger's specialization of the Soul Beast, the Necromancer's specialization of the Scourge, the Revenant's specialization of the Renegade, and one more, the Guardian's specialization of the Firebrand.
Okay, so immediately I want to pick up on the fact that 2 years ago you worked on the Druid, which was very, very much a support spec and heavily angled that. This time you've taken some of that, it seems, and put it into the Scourge. Yes. So what are your opinions on building the Scourge in lieu of the Druid and the lessons you learned there?
So the first time around, there were a lot of lessons learned, like actually trying to build a specialization that is based essentially around support. It was the only real one that was just support based.
A big thing people will say with the Druid is because it is so powerful in buffing damage as well as healing. How do you carve out space to have other support specs? Was that something on your mind?
It was absolutely on my mind. It's been a bit of a concern even on the Druid, just bringing so much damage, though not personal damage, to the support role. The Scourge seeks to do so similarly through the barrier mechanic. It provides you with more instantaneous defense rather than like constant support like the Druid does. This, I think, carves out a different type of support, where the Scourge also brings a slightly more offensive, more necro-y field support where they corrupt boons fairly frequently, essentially removing defenses rather than increasing damage.
Okay. Well, more generally speaking, out of all the work you've done on this expansion, what's an area that you think is particularly exciting people might not quite pick up on very quickly out of your elite specializations? Or something you're desperate to share with people?
I'm really looking forward to seeing people play with the ammunition mechanic as well as barrier. Like those are the two kind of new systems that we introduced this time around, and I think that's going to create a lot of space for some emergent types of gameplay where you're making decisions like mechanically on some levels of do you want to essentially use all of your abilities at once and just be stuck in a kind of a lull for a while with the ammunition skills, or do you want to actually try and slowly dole them out to be more consistent, things like that.
Okay, well, so to round this out, I once heard this new ammunition mechanic is very similar to mantras. I once heard that mantras are one of the hardest things to balance because of that dynamism of them.
We had to look really hard at that. Because the Guardian, the Firebrand, now gets access to mantras, that was very specifically under the lens. We tried to differentiate the Mesmer mantras from the Guardian's mantras. The Mesmer is a caster, naturally so. As Robert was saying, they can cast spells regularly. Their mantras, they recharge really slowly, but they're actually really good at casting them in combat. Mantras have long cast times. The Guardians, they have even longer cast times, but their recharge mechanic is much faster, so they can actually more slowly dole things out. They also have a special final charge of their mantras, where if they use that, it's more powerful than the previous charges, but then it goes on like a really, really long cooldown for the entire skill. Okay. Whereas, it's the opposite.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. But thank you very much to you three, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Cheers, guys. Honestly, we could have talked so long. Yeah. Well, damn, ain't time constraints a bitch. Well, there you go, guys. That's the interview. Looking back on this one, I wish I'd spoken a little bit less so that we could have got a bit more from them during the time. But it's hard. I mean, you just want to have a cool conversation with these guys about a million different things. Elite specializations are so big and complicated. And, well, with a 10-minute time slot and you're running over anyway, how much can you really get? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Anyway, I tried to keep it top level about overarching design things. I had no idea how much nitty-gritty information the community would have at this point anyway. I think this will probably stand the test of time a little bit more as soon as we've seen all the tooltips and so forth. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for watching. I got a couple more interviews coming soon, working as hard as I can to get them out. I'll see you soon.